May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over. Millions were celebrating, but not everyone felt relief. Among the prisoners of war in the United States, there was a young German soldier named Lucas Reinhardt, whose life had been turned upside down. Captured in Tunisia months earlier, he had been sent across the Atlantic to a place he expected to be harsh, brutal, and unforgiving. Instead, he found something entirely different: comfort, structure, and even kindness from those he had been trained to hate. The guards at Camp Perry, Ohio, watched in disbelief as Reinhardt made an unusual request. He didn't want to go home. He didn't want freedom. He wanted to stay in America. Why would a captured enemy soldier feel this way? And what made life in Camp Perry so surprisingly humane? Lucas Reinhardt arrived at Camp Perry in March 1943 after an exhausting 34-day journey from North Africa. Captured during the final days of the Tunisia campaign, he was processed through Algeria, shipped to Norfolk, and then transferred by train to northern Ohio. He expected barbed wire, guard towers, starvation, and brutal conditions. But what he found was completely different. Camp Perry sprawled across 640 acres on the shore of Lake Erie, with wooden barracks equipped with heating, electricity, and running water. There was a library, a canteen, a theater, and recreational areas where prisoners could play sports, watch films, or attend classes. His first meal stunned him: scrambled eggs, bacon, orange juice, toast, and real coffee. A feast after months of meager rations. As he ate, he realized a shocking truth: he was being treated with dignity, like a human being, rather than as an enemy. This small revelation would change his perception of America forever. During the first months at Camp Perry, Reinhardt began to notice a surprising transformation, not just in himself, but in other prisoners as well. The Geneva Convention required the U.S. to feed prisoners the same rations as American soldiers, and Camp Perry followed this rule meticulously. Breakfasts included eggs, meat, bread, fruit, and coffee. Lunches and dinners had meat, vegetables, potatoes or rice, and dessert. Special holidays were celebrated too: turkey on Thanksgiving, ham and pie on Christmas. For Reinhardt, who had lived through hunger and deprivation in North Africa, this abundance was almost overwhelming. Prisoners gained weight, grew healthier, and felt their energy return. Reinhardt himself gained 41 pounds in 8 months, while his bunkmate Werner Hoffman joked that Americans were fattening them for slaughter. Yet Reinhardt saw the difference clearly. This was humane treatment, not propaganda, not cruelty disguised as care. The experience planted a seed of admiration, and later, a desire to return to America once the war ended. Life at Camp Perry settled into a predictable routine that was almost comforting after the chaos Reinhardt had endured in North Africa and Tunisia. Early mornings brought long workdays on nearby farms, where prisoners harvested crops, loaded crates, and cleared fields under the summer sun. Reinhardt, having grown up on a farm near Dresden, adapted quickly. Farm owners like Howard Miller treated the prisoners with respect, providing water, shade, and basic fairness, paying the men 80 cents a day in camp scrip. Evenings were filled with recreation and education. Prisoners attended concerts, watched movies, played sports, and could even take classes to learn new skills. Religious services offered comfort, and letters home, though slow, kept them connected. For Reinhardt, each day brought a mix of work, leisure, and stability, things he had rarely experienced during the war. The simple structure of life at Camp Perry, combined with good treatment and decent food, began to reshape the prisoners' outlook and made America feel less like an enemy country and more like a place of opportunity. Reinhardt's health improved quickly in Camp Perry. He had been gaunt and malnourished when captured, weighing just 128 pounds. Within 8 months, he gained 41 pounds, reaching 169, while other prisoners experienced similar transformations. The camp doctor conducted regular medical checkups, ensuring the men stayed healthy. and many prisoners who had once been weak and sickly regained their strength. Work on farms provided not only exercise, but also a sense of purpose. Reinhardt earned money, bought essentials like a winter coat, and found pride in contributing to productive labor. Yet, it wasn't just physical well-being that improved. Access to books, music, and educational classes gave prisoners mental stimulation, while recreational activities and religious services provided emotional support. Despite being a prisoner, Reinhardt realized he was treated better than many soldiers in his own army. The humane treatment, decent food, and structured life planted the seed of a surprising thought. Perhaps returning home to a war-torn Germany wasn't the future he wanted. Reinhardt's days fell into a steady routine. Mornings began with long work on farms, harvesting crops like tomatoes, loading crates, and clearing fields. Despite the physical labor, he adapted quickly, having grown up on a farm near Dresden. Farm owners like Howard Miller treated prisoners fairly, providing water, shade, and respect, and even paid them small wages issued as camp script. Evenings were filled with recreation, movies, sports, concerts, and religious services. Reinhardt attended Catholic Mass every Sunday, finding comfort in familiar rituals. Prisoners wrote letters home, though mail to Germany became rare as the war worsened. Reinhardt treasured the few letters he received, including one from his mother in January 1945, describing shortages, air raids, and his father's failing health. Tragically, when Dresden was firebombed, he later learned his entire family had been killed. This news devastated him. He withdrew from communal life, sitting alone after work, unable to process the loss. Yet Camp Perry offered stability and safety, a stark contrast to the chaos awaiting in Germany. By spring 1945, Germany's defeat was undeniable. Guards at Camp Perry relaxed, and escape seemed meaningless. Most prisoners had nowhere to return. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Reinhardt felt only dread. Repatriation meant returning to a ruined homeland, with no family, home, or future. Many prisoners shared his sentiment, but U.S. policy required them to go. Rumors of exceptions circulated, giving some hope. Reinhardt spoke with Howard Miller, who promised future help but could not intervene immediately. In October 1945, Reinhardt and hundreds of others left Camp Perry, heading to Camp Shanks near New York. Unlike the orderly Ohio camp, Shanks was crowded, tense, and temporary. Prisoners waited days for transport, uncertain of what awaited them. On October 17, 1945, the SS Marine Raven departed with 3,200 German prisoners. During the 9-day Atlantic crossing, Reinhardt spent hours reflecting on the contrast between life at Camp Perry and what he expected in Germany. The SS Marine Raven finally docked at Cherbourg, France, on October 26, 1945. From there, trains carried the prisoners through France into Germany's American-occupied zone. As Reinhardt looked out the window, he saw devastation everywhere. Cities reduced to rubble, bridges destroyed, factories flattened. The destruction repeated town after town, leaving no place untouched. Near Mannheim, American authorities processed the returning POWs. Reinhardt underwent medical exams, received his papers, and was given temporary housing. Technically free, he now faced freedom with nothing, no money, no belongings, no family, and an uncertain future. He inquired about Dresden, only to learn it lay in the Soviet zone, heavily damaged and difficult to reach. Determined, Reinhardt decided to go anyway. On November 2nd, he boarded a train east, passing through checkpoints manned by Soviet soldiers who scrutinized every document. After 3 grueling days, Dresden appeared, but the city he remembered was gone, reduced to skeletal ruins, collapsed churches, and streets filled with rubble. Reinhardt stepped off the train and surveyed Dresden, his childhood home, only to find complete devastation. Entire neighborhoods were flattened, the Frauenkirche reduced to blackened stone. The building where his family had lived was gone, erased from the map. For hours, Reinhardt wandered the ruins, overwhelmed by the destruction and the loss of everything he had known. The scale of the devastation was incomprehensible, leaving him in shock and grief. After 6 hours in the ruined city, he left, knowing he could not rebuild his past. Instead, he traveled back to Mannheim, joining reconstruction efforts. He worked clearing rubble, hauling debris, and earning meager pay. Food was scarce, and life was harsh. By January 1946, Reinhardt had lost significant weight, far below what he had weighed when leaving Ohio. Despite the hardships, he never forgot the kindness he had experienced in America. The memory of Camp Perry, the fair treatment, and the friendships he had formed became a guiding light in his struggle to survive in post-war Germany. Life in post-war Germany was harsh and uncertain. Reinhardt, like many former POWs, faced ruined cities, destroyed infrastructure, and scarce food. Jobs were few, wages were low, and survival became a daily challenge. But he never forgot the opportunities and humane treatment he had received in America. Memories of Camp Perry, the steady meals, respectful treatment, work on the farm, and friendships remained vivid. Reinhardt, along with other former prisoners, began planning for the future. Many saved every possible penny, gathered documents, and waited for immigration policies to change. Letters from former comrades kept hope alive. Werner Hoffmann in Hamburg, for example, shared updates and encouragement. Reinhardt's determination grew, fueled by the contrast between his life in America and the chaos of Germany. He dreamed of returning, not as a prisoner, but as a free man, to the country that had shown him dignity and opportunity. By 1948, a window of hope opened through the Displaced Persons Act, creating a legal path for some former POWs to immigrate to the United States. In 1948, Reinhardt applied to return to the United States under the Displaced Persons Act. He had a strong case, a clean record, recommendations from Camp Perry, and a job offer from Howard Miller. The process, however, was slow and filled with uncertainty. Each day of waiting tested his patience, but he remained focused, saving what little money he could, and keeping in touch with former POW friends who shared the same goal. Finally, after 14 months, approval arrived. In September 1949, Reinhardt received his visa. On October 12, 1949, he landed in New York City, exactly 4 years after leaving as a prisoner. But this time, everything was different. He was free, legal, and sponsored. Howard Miller met him at the dock, welcoming him back. The familiar farm in Ohio awaited him. But now, Reinhardt was no longer captive. He was an employee, able to build a life on his own terms. Reinhardt returned to the same farm where he had once worked as a prisoner, but everything felt different. Now, he earned $35 per week, plus room and board. And for the first time, he had freedom to make choices. He could leave the farm, save money, and plan a future. The routines were familiar: early mornings, long days, and evenings in the small farmhouse. But the sense of oppression was gone. In 1952, Reinhardt met Anna Schmidt, a German immigrant like him, at a church social in Port Clinton. She worked as a seamstress and shared Reinhardt's experience of starting over in a foreign land. They married in 1953 and soon had children, building a family and a home together. Slowly, the farm grew, his savings increased, and Reinhardt embraced life in America with gratitude. The country that had once held him as a prisoner had now given him hope, opportunity, and a second chance at life. By the mid-1950s, Reinhardt's life in Ohio was firmly established. He became a United States citizen in 1955, voting in his first election the following year. The farm he had purchased grew steadily, allowing him to provide for his family and live independently. He never returned to Germany, choosing instead to build a future in the country that had once treated him with dignity. Other former prisoners followed similar paths. Men like Werner Hoffmann returned to Ohio to work in steel mills and unions, while Hans Kruger opened a bakery in Toledo that lasted for decades. Fritz Weber became a renowned mechanic in Columbus. These men shared a common experience. They had been captured during the war, treated humanely, and later chose to make America their home. Reinhardt's story showed that humane treatment and opportunity could transform lives, turning former enemies into productive citizens who contributed meaningfully to society. By the 1970s, Reinhardt's farm had grown to 120 acres, employing seasonal workers and thriving under his care. He never returned to Germany, and he declined compensation for wartime property loss, valuing the life he had built in Ohio. Lucas Reinhardt passed away in 1998 at the age of 76, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, gratitude, and success. His story illustrates a powerful lesson: how people are treated in times of conflict can shape entire lives and even generations. Camp Perry, once a prisoner of war facility, became a symbol of compassion and dignity. The men who had once been enemies returned not with anger, but with gratitude, building lives that enriched the communities that had once held them. Lucas Reinhardt's journey proves something timeless. Humanity and fairness can transform even the darkest moments into hope and opportunity.